Hi. So I'm just hanging out and talking about the reasons that we get stuck on go with ADHD. Lots of reasons that we tend to get stuck on things and not never start them or get stuck in the middle. And so if you have any questions, let me know, and I'm just gonna get started. So there's a lot of reasons we get stuck. The first big group that I have is emotional weight. So this is related, if you've heard about it, to the rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That's where we take things really hard, but we also have a really intense inner critic. And so we can often take things harder than people intend them to be. So that's one of the reasons that we can get stuck. Um, and it happens without actually necessarily having other people involved. Sometimes it does. So one of the first things that you see is if something is really old and we've been feeling bad that we should have done it a long time ago, that makes it way harder to face the task, whatever it is. So even if other people don't see it as being old, if we feel like we should have already done it, that is enough for us to build up a lot of resistance and make it a lot harder to face that task. So we may find literally anything else we can do except that task. So, one of the other reasons that we'll get stuck is if we do have feelings of being judged. So, this can come out in a lot of ways, like maybe I'm writing an email to a manager or to a client, and I'm really worried that they're going to judge me for what I'm saying, even if that they'll have judgment brought up again about something if it's in our past performance. That is another reason that we can kind of freeze up a little bit and really put off writing that email sometimes till it should have been sent a long time ago. And then we get back into that now it's old and we feel bad about it for other reasons also. Sometimes a task has is really hard and we'll get stuck on it because there's an inner part of us that's kind of rebelling against it. This can come from a lot of places, but I like to say that folks with ADHD, that we have an inner rebellious teen, and that inner rebellious teen also has needs that we need to address, even when we're adults. So sometimes we're kind of rebelling against ourselves on a task, and that's one of the places. I mean, that's something that often involves a lot deeper work when we have an inner teen that's rebelling against what we're doing, or what we're trying to get ourselves to do. And so sometimes we have to work on the relationship we have with that inner teen to make it so that they will uh, cooperate and not sit there going, no, I'm not going to do it. One of the places that can come from is that really harsh inner critic. When we're feeling so bad, there's something that we should have been doing a long time ago, or just that we should be doing, even if it's something we want to do for fun. And I've seen this happen for hobbies just as much as I've seen it happen for um, like a work thing. Oh, I should be doing this. It's fun. And the more we tell ourselves we should be, the more fuel it gives that sort of inner rebellious teen. It's like, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. And so then we find ourselves scrolling, we find ourselves doing every other task except that thing that we're wanting to start. Um, uh, Another reason that we can get stuck on a task is just when it's so boring. There's not a lot I can do to really get myself excited to do taxes, to deal with the DMV. I mean, I thought it was I thought it was so early starting the process to get my driver's license renewed this year, and my birthday's this week and it expires this week, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, it's this week. Now it's on time. I'm not doing it early anymore because it's so boring. I really don't want to do it. And when a task is really boring, especially if it's like simple or small or whatever, it makes it that much harder for us to do and to face unless we bring other tools to it. So, thing being really boring. That's why I got stuck on this stream. Welcome to the club. I'm from Oregon, Portland, Eugene, depends on the time. Somebody just asked him one of the things. Another thing is really, if there's any combination of these, it's going to make it way harder to get out of our stuck spot. Um, there's also just we do overload ourselves with shoulds. Um, and those can come from a lot of places. And when we get bogged down with shoulds for whatever reason, whether there's a rebellious teen involved or not, then all of a sudden um, we're going to start resisting doing the things because, well, if I face any of them, I have to say no to something else, and it gets real hard. And some of it's just because sometimes we've overcommitted and we've said we're going to do more things than we actually can do. Uh, Sometimes we have a notification overload. So every time I look at my phone, if I'm seeing a zillion things that I feel like I should have already done that I can't act on now, that's going to make it a lot harder to face any of them. And so having somebody sometimes just sitting there and pausing and going through our notifications and getting rid of them. Any reminder we see at the wrong time, it's going to overload us with the shoulds and make it less likely we want to do that thing. So, for example, I knew somebody who had like a stack of paperwork they didn't want to do sitting outside their bedroom door so that every time they walked past it, it reminded them to do it. But that's never the time that you're gonna do it. So all it did was make it so that it was even harder to actually do those tasks. Um, so yeah, it made the task way harder to actually address. And so those things built up until they didn't want to face them at all. Um, oh, if we're not sure how to balance our different work types, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, like if we get to the point where, oh, I have so many different types of work, I get decision fatigue and shut down on any one of them, then that's another place that we can get bogged down with the shoulds is, but I should do this and I should do this and I should do this. And if we can't make up our mind, guess what's an easy default? We're going to go back to scrolling. We're going to go back to whatever our default behavior is that we do when we don't know how to face something. Um, Here's the biggest one and the hardest one to address is if you're already burned out. If you are already burned out, you don't have any of that energy left to give. And when we don't have any more of that energy left to give, we're drawing from an empty well. And the harder we are on ourselves about that, the longer it's going to take to refill that well. Now, if you notice you are getting burned out and not burned out yet, burnout is one of those things that is way easier to prevent than it is to actually treat once you're there. Like once we're in burnout mode, we do have to handle things differently, and our options are not going to be quite as large as they're going to be for when we're not burned out yet. But some of those things we can add in are, what are the activities that legitimately bring you joy? What are the things that you enjoy doing that sort of fill you back up again so that you can get to that point of not constantly drawing from open well? Hi, Jans. Anything we can do to sort of pull up from that spot will help us get back to a better balance and get some of that motivational energy again, because at a certain point, sometimes we uh, some of the things that can bring people joy are having a creative activity. I mean, it could be coloring in a coloring book. It doesn't matter, but anything that you get creative energy from can be some of those things that fill our well back up, so we aren't constantly drawing out of nothing. By the way, if anybody has questions, ask away. Um, I can talk about burnout all day long. Uh, um, Sometimes it's enjoying time in nature, enjoying time with loved ones, family or otherwise. Um, but ideally not in a way that's putting pressure on yourself, because we are now in the holiday season TM. If you're putting tons of pressure on yourself about all of these gatherings you're going to be doing with people, this is not filling it up. Enjoying the time, figuring out what's sort of my minimum viable so I don't get overloaded, which is another thing to be cautious about, and trying to not get overloaded, but also trying to um, make sure you're getting that contact. If you do better with small, intimate, like one-on-one conversations, then maybe those are the type you should be scheduling when you're looking forward to holiday activities. Um, so another type of thing that folks with ADHD get stuck on, excuse me, is we tend to be really expansive thinkers. So if you've ever done that thing where you were given an assignment to do and you found a way to make it 10 times bigger, uh, that that's what we're talking about. We often have this expansive thinking where, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, and we add in more stuff until the thing becomes so large. Well, that can get in the way of our actually getting stuck, even though it gets us excited about the project in a lot of ways, because we can have these creative ideas. Sometimes it gets so overwhelming that we can't convince part of our brain to start it. If there's a smart part of your brain in there that knows, hey, you know what, you can't do this project, we'll lose our motivation to actually get started. Oh, your wife hates when you schedule one-on-one conversations with her. I'm sorry. Oh, maybe you can find something that feels more natural to her. Uh, yeah. So if there's a part of our brain that we can't get on board with doing it because it's like, you know what? I know you. This isn't going to happen. We'll oftentimes get back into that. I don't know how to start. I can't convince my brain to get on board and not do it. But the other one is related, which is just literally, I don't know where to start. And that's because a lot of folks with ADHD, we see so many connections. If I'm seeing connections to all the parts of this project at the same time, I often can't find a place to start it. It feels like, you get out, this is season, you get out those Christmas lights and they're all tangled up and jumbled. That's how sometimes a project may feel to me, is I have all of these wires all crumpled up together and I can't find the place to start. And if I can't find the place to start, I usually just won't. Uh, Sometimes we lack knowledge or need help to start. I mean, I'll be totally honest. Like, one of the reasons that I am doing a course on getting unstuck with, getting your tasks unstuck with ADHD is because uh, it's one of the most common coaching topics that people bring to me. Is I'm trying to do this thing. I'm starting a new career, starting a new business, um, starting my retirement, and I just don't know where to start. Can be one of the biggest things that people appreciate help with. Feeling like, oh, I should be able to do it on my own is not helpful. It's just not helpful at all. Um, so figuring out where to start, that's part of it. If we can't visualize where to start, I've seen exceptions, but most people with ADHD tend to be very visual thinkers. If we can't visualize our starting place, if we can't visualize like, oh, I'm going to start with this, a lot of times we'll just shut down to it. The bigger it is, the more of that emotional weight we still have on it, the easier it is to just straight up shut down to it. Um, if the task says, let's clean the basement, I, have you seen my basement? Not really, but if there's stuff everywhere, if I don't know where to start, even just like cleaning my office, I found is a problem. Like, oh, do I take out the stuff that's in the way first? Do I start vacuuming? Like, where do I start on it so that I know where the end goal is, but it's not having crap everywhere. But what are the tasks I need to do to actually start? Um, and knowing what those are and figuring those out can be really helpful. Um, by the way, sometimes people do just use something like not task based, that may just be set a timer for 5 minutes. Whatever happens at 5 minutes is better than nothing, which is totally fine. But that's also like lowering that standard to a certain extent, of saying, okay, it doesn't all have to be done, which is another one of our big issues, is all or nothing thinking. Um, this idea that, oh, if I can't do all of this big project, if I can't clean the entire basement, why would I even start? um, I can't do it all now, so I can't start now. And so sometimes when people get that just a little bit of unstuck, just setting a timer, because I've now accepted a different standard. My standard is whatever I can do in 5 minutes is better than the nothing I was doing before. So just finding really any place we can grab on. Sometimes there is a missing action that like part of our brain knows but not consciously, so that we're missing an important step. Maybe it's I don't have any place to put all of these Goodwill items I'm going to find in my basement, um, or whatever. Those can end up piling up. Um, So in the all or nothing thinking, a lot of times that will stop us of um I need all of the information before I can start, because we do tend to be information gatherers. So sometimes we get stuck in the I need more information before I can start. And I see this a lot. I help folks find like task management systems that are working for them. But if we feel like, oh, I need to research everything before I can start, one, the information will always change, right? And so a lot of times we get stuck there. But also, if we don't start till we have the answers, sometimes we never can figure. Okay, I'm gonna take a step back mentally. If we think, oh, I need to research, I need to find the perfect task management system before I can start, you may actually never know what you really want from a task management system, because sometimes you have to just pick one and use it to even start, right? So we'll often get stuck on those things where it's like I need to know all the things before I start. Even in like college research papers, a lot of times people feel like get stuck in the research mode forever, because researching stuff is fun and sometimes writing is boring. and, and also we like to learn things. And so sometimes we'll get stuck in that I need to know everything before I can even start. Um, Another really, really common thing for folks with ADHD getting stuck on starting things is just straight up decision fatigue. We are more susceptible to decision fatigue with ADHD, but it's one of those things like there are some people who are, very bright with ADHD who will get diagnosed later because they can compensate in school and things like that. Decision fatigue is one of those that will impact people who are gifted more. The more power your brain has, the more it fuels our ability to come up with possible solutions that then we have to pick from. So the decision fatigue actually can get worse as intelligence goes up, because we're just using our brain to fuel more options to get fatigued with. Um, so a lot of times people will actually hit decision fatigue way, way faster. Um, Anybody have any questions about getting stuck? All right. Good to see people. uh, I want to go in a little bit more detail because the emotional weight part ends up being so big um, compared to the others. Like they'll get it fueled in, but when I see people who are really stuck, there is almost always an emotional weight component to it. Um, and so I want to dig into those a little bit more. So when a task feels really old and like we can't face it, some of the ways that we can turn that around. I was working with a client and we were on Zoom, and I could see this pile of papers behind him, and I said, "Hey, what's that pile of papers behind you?" I was like, "It looks like a pile of old guilt," and he's like, "Yes, yes, that is exactly what that is." Because it was a pile of things that he meant to go through later, meant to deal with. And the more of those we keep around and the more uh, visual they are, it will deteriorate our energy long term. It will bog us down long term. So if you have a point in time where you can, and you may have to do this with somebody else, right? It's facing emotional stuff by yourself is not always easy or possible. But if you're able to, maybe sit down with somebody else and go through those, or at the very least, get them out of your sight. I challenged this client to put it in his desk. I think he refused, but it's up to him. Uh, but I don't remember for sure. Uh, Finding a way to get it out of your sight or digging it down, because there's rarely as much in those as you think there is to do, because usually by the time it's been sitting there a long time, it's all old anyway. And I mean, like, as in outdated old. Like, oh, this doesn't apply anymore because whatever, it's from something I wanted to buy in 2014. Not really 2014, but a long time ago. It's a lot of times they become irrelevant, but we get so much anxiety about there could be something hidden in there. There could be something in there that's going to tell me I need to do something, And that's scary because there could be so much of that. A lot of times we'll avoid it forever, but constantly feel guilty when we look at it because there's maybe one thing that we're aware of is in there, or just fears that there could be more in there. And so, um, taking the time with somebody else if you need to, and I've definitely done this with clients, but you can do it with a friend too if they're not a judgy friend. Um, Going through and actually looking at when you have an old pile of guilt, going through and looking at them, so that you can see what's really there and what do I actually do with it. Most of the stuff in there, in my experience, is usually completely outdated, but it sits there making us feel guilty. And then usually a few things will end up on a task list, a couple things go in a reference pile when we do that, but we've eliminated like one piece of that old guilt. And so figuring out, if you can't do those, at the very least, don't look at it every day, because it's adding to that like slow burnout over time where I'm going to build up more and more resistance to this particular task. I'm just checking on. Let's look back at my outline. Another really good one to bring in a buddy system is the most, when in doubt, bring in the buddy system is the most common generic ADHD piece of advice one can give. Bringing in a buddy. It could be like a friend who's not judgy. It could be a coach. It could be a therapist. It could be like another ADD or you've connected with. In our ADHD guild, we have co-working channels, but we also have like chats. So you could be like, oh, could we do this together? But bringing in a buddy, co-working, body doubling, whatever you want to call it, is the primary go-to. If you don't know what else to do, try that first. I mean, just pure ADHD, whatever it is, that's one of the best just defaults. Because it also can help with the feelings of being judged. Like either by, sometimes we feel judged by our own tasks. Like it's yelling at me right there that I should have done it a long time ago. Um, but also it can come in the feelings of being judged like by another person. Um, Even somebody who's not judgy. Like I had to email somebody that was just, better known than me. And I didn't know very much about this person. And so like I just said to my coach at the time, I was like, "Hey, I am overthinking this to death. I just decided I'm not going to even try to write it by myself. Could we just write it together?" And that's because even though this person was not judging me, I was feeling prejudged about sending this email. And so I just had to write it with another person rather than twist in the wind forever, not being able to do it. Cool, cool. You'd think it would automatically put on do not disturb, but I guess not. uh, that would be smart, right? Anyway, um, where was I? Oh yeah, the reason that having another person can help with the feelings of being judged is it's like when you have this very powerful imagination, I can imagine this other person coming up with all kinds of judgy or feeling bothered by me or whatever. And I can make that up. But when there's another person's presence, like a real person with actual feelings and thoughts about it, that I can ideally even talk to about it while I'm doing it, that real person can help drown out my own imaginations about all of the negative things that somebody else could be feeling in response to me doing this email or whatever it is. And so bringing in that other person, it's the same with the task. Like it's way harder for me to have this inner dialogue in my head with this task where it's yelling at me about how old it is when there's another human being there. With another human being, suddenly like they take up that space in our mind, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, it's it's really helpful to have a buddy is the main bit. Um, it also helps when something's so boring that I can't face it. Like sometimes you can have a good old fashioned work party with somebody. Um, Sometimes co-working can help when it's that like inner rebellious teen that we have that's like, no, I don't want to do it. But ultimately, like in the long run, we will have to work on that. Work on improving that relationship with our inner teen. And sometimes that means like, building a new dialogue rather than just the inner critic dialogue that tells us how awful we are or you didn't do that thing. Shame on you. Um, yeah, in the long run, that's what we'll have to do for that part of it. But it's not. It might be helped with co-working in the short run, but it's not for sure. Um, does I'm curious what people's notification loads are like. I don't. I've had mine rather tamed for a long time. If anybody wants to share theirs, I'd totally be curious. But um, those feelings of shoulds, I don't think for anybody who really has a hard time getting back to text messages, I don't think having that badge on your phone that says how many unread text messages there are is helping you. Having If you see that every time, and email's worse, but it's hmm, email is a horrific cesspool, um, but it's also largely we have to make deals with ourselves about how we're going to handle email. Whereas theoretically, the volume of text messages you get is potentially manageable. And yet I see people struggle with it all the time. And so if you notice that, hey, I'm not getting back to these messages, you're probably feeling bad about them. And turning off that badge may help reduce that feeling of that I should be getting back to these people. Um, and again, when we get a badge number that's really high, it turns into one of those piles of guilt where I know there's stuff I should do in there, but also there's probably people I should just like mark it as read and it doesn't matter if I reply. And it's just a big ball of yuck in there. So actually, if you're able to sit down with somebody else, and I've done this with clients, like let's go through all of your tasks or your texts. Let's go through all your texts and figure out, okay, this one actually needs a reply. How should I reply to it? Usually there's something in there that fits in with the other thing, which is I didn't know how to reply. And so sometimes we actually need to sit down like, okay, what do I want from this interaction? Or what does this person actually need from me? Because sometimes we've invented that they need way more from us than they actually needed. Maybe all they needed was oh, that really sucks. I'm sorry. But we thought we had to solve their problem. Uh, so figuring it may actually require like sitting down and figuring out, okay, what are these? But it may have led to the overload in the first place because you had that badge, that little red circle with the number in it telling you how behind you were. Um, yeah, notifications are good sometimes, I think is what the lesson, but the badges are mostly, in my experience, ways to get overloaded with old guilt because they just remind us what we haven't done already. Um, to anyone who is already burned out, and that's why you feel like you're not getting stuff done, I would highly recommend uh, actually deciding what is one thing you're going to do that makes you happy that you're going to try to start doing in any volume. If like outdoors does it, maybe it's, I'm going to stand out, I'm going to walk around outside for 5 minutes, even if it's freezing cold or raining, as it often is where I live. Uh, I'm going to go out and face that because, my brain needs that. So I just think of one thing that you could do that would uh, help encourage that part of your brain to be happy again. If you're looking for more things on getting unstuck, I have a course coming up. Today is the last day of the Cyber Monday sale for it. And so I just wanted to post it up. It disappeared. There we go. So if anybody is interested in learning more, we're going to have a cohort class. It's live taught. We're going to learn all the different things that we can do to help our brains get unstuck. You're going to have accountability in the class, say the things that you're going to do, other people will hear it, have classmates, you can work with them, we'll have body doubling co-working channels, all of those different things. So if you're interested, come join us, check it out. Today's the last day of the 50% off sale. And yeah, hopefully you guys aren't that stuck, but if you are, there's always ways you can meet up with other people and learn ways to help you get unstuck. So that's my pitch for it. Any other questions from folks? I don't see any. Well, hopefully you're not that stuck and have a great rest of your week.